Hi, really excited to be here. My name is Alex Fiedler. I'm the Director of Knowledge Experience at Torque. And my talk today is going to be knowledge experience for a PLG strategy. Now, if you're not sure what that is, don't worry, we're going to get into everything during the talk. First of all, I'm really excited to be here. My first time at Write the Docs was actually in Portland in 2019. Traveled all the way from Israel there. It was a great experience, and I remember thinking, "Wow, this is a really high quality level of talks, and everyone is just really knowledgeable." And I said, "I hope to be there someday." So I still don't think I'm there, but I'm excited to be given the opportunity to give a talk on what I know. So, first, I just want to talk a little bit about you. So, who are you? This talk is really meant for everybody. A PLG strategy, which we're going to get to soon, involves everyone. It involves every single team: product teams, knowledge teams, sales, marketing, and of course the leadership. So, product teams includes everyone like product managers, product designers, UX researchers, UX experts. Knowledge teams traditionally are technical writers, UX writers, instructional designers, and videographers. Sales and marketing teams include SDRs, BDRs, product marketing managers, and social media managers, and of course executives. Executives are founders, C-suites, and VPs. So if we get a little bit about me, I'll make this quick. I started at VMware about 10 years ago. That was where I did an internship, and it led to a full-time position at VMware. And I jumped straight into the cyber world after that. After about 3 years at VMware, I went to a startup called Demisto, a cybersecurity automation platform, and I've been there ever since in the world of cybersecurity. When I started out, I quickly jumped into the CEO role. No, not chief executive officer. It's what I call, as a native English speaker, the chief English officer. So very quickly, although I was a technical writer, I got exposed to UX writing, video scripts, editing those, reviewing marketing materials. So although I wasn't always involved in writing them, I usually reviewed and was exposed to lots of different types of writing that go on at an organization, especially in the startups. What I like to do at work, I love researching. I think, a few hours of research, and I try to tell this to all my teams, is really worth it in the long run. That, if you write 100 words that are based on 3 hours of research for something, I think it'll be much better. So I really love researching. I love having discussions about what's going to be best. I love bumping ideas off of each other and throwing them around. And implementing content strategy, because it really ties everything together. So I find it challenging and fun. You see, I work with coffee enthusiasts that do things with coffee I've never seen before. I like instant coffee at room temperature. And I will always use cooking and food analogies when trying to explain an idea or a situation. And so it's possible you might hear me compare something to a restaurant or food. So let's start off and take a look at the agenda for the day. So PLG is not a new term, PLG is not new, but with recent trends, it's taking over an increasing presence in high tech. So even though it's popular and very successful in many companies, I'll explain some barriers to going full-blown PLG. We'll discuss some of the basics. There are some variations of PLG on a sliding scale, and how we personally are implementing it at Torque. And I'll also show you some more well-known PLG companies to give you an idea of who they are, and you can kind of connect the dots as to the theory that I'm giving and then these companies that implement them. So next, we're going to take a look at knowledge experience. I don't think that I've defined this term, but I obviously have not coined it, but I do use it for a very specific reason. And, people in the beginning gave me a hard time about it, that, you own the knowledge. And I said, no, we own the experience. So knowledge experience plays a very important role in a PLG strategy. And I'll explain where we are currently, where knowledge usually sits now in a company and where it sits in a PLG company. Some of the content that falls under the scope of UX, and then a little bit more about that. And finally, we'll discuss content strategy. Content strategy really I'm sure we have a lot of content strategists here, so they might be able to explain it perhaps better. But in my thinking, it's the packaging and distribution of knowledge content to achieve a specific goal. And in a PLG strategy, it's really to enable users to succeed as quickly, easily, and efficiently as possible. So let's start by getting a little bit deeper of an understanding of what PLG is. PLG is a go-to-market strategy in which the product is the main driver to acquire, expand, and retain customers. So that's a perfect world, right? That's the perfect, the textbook definition. But PLG, product-led growth, exists on a sliding scale. And there are different levels of involvement on that sliding scale for different teams. The ones that are most affected on that scale, I would say, are sales reps, solution architects, sales engineers, and anyone really associated with the sales team. Now, PLE, which is product-led expansion, you might have heard it as land and expand. It still relies heavily on lead generation and traditional sales enterprise sales model, but it does implement more of a PLG strategy. So that's what we're discussing on the sliding scale. So I want to start off by explaining who PLG is for and who it's not. I'll actually start with the right side with who it's not for. On-prem products generally require some sort of provisioning of servers or heavy installation, or it really is dependent on other teams to implement some aspect of the product. So the idea of giving a user the ability to get into the product right away on their own and use it is really not possible or it's much more difficult with on-prem products. Established enterprises or established companies, they usually have set processes, and PLG, unless they've been doing it from the beginning, is very difficult to implement because it's a strategic decision. Meaning, it's very hard to turn course. It's like a giant ship trying to just turn on a whim. It's very difficult to do that. Teams are in place, processes are in place. So an established company, it's harder to do. And it's pretty rare if you have an expensive product that the end user, the one who's going to be using it or testing it out, is going to be the one who's signing the check for the project. So those are the three, I'd say, main barriers to PLG: is on-prem, established enterprises, and expensive products. So who is PLG for? Really for SaaS or cloud-based products that generally require no additional resources, and they're available to the users immediately after they sign up for the product. Also for startups, because generally their processes are more flexible, and they have a go-to-market that reduces overhead. A go-to-market strategy that reduces overhead and and headcount could really be a welcome opportunity for the entire organization. And also if you have flexible pricing tiers, because it creates realistic expectations, meaning if you're given free access to a product that also has an enterprise, several $1,000s a month version, you're not going to be getting that full version. Users know they're not going to get it. They're going to have limited functionality or limited time access. It's going to be limited in some way, and that manages expectations to what they can expect when they get inside the product. So what I want to do now is take a look at some of the more successful and well-known PLG companies, most of which you've probably heard of. So you see here by the logos, we have Zoom, Canva, Monday.com, Calendly, Atlassian, Figma, and two that I didn't add here are Datadog and Facebook. Pretty much like we said before, these are companies where you can go in, use some version of the product, either for a certain amount of time or with a certain amount of features, and get up and running it with it on your own, not to provision servers or have to ask someone to sign a check right away. The idea is sign up, start using the product right away. Now that we have a better understanding of what PLG is, I actually want to take a step back and look at the traditional or prevailing sales cycle. So this is something you've probably seen before. Traditionally, this is called the sales funnel. I call this the sales vortex. Because when you think of a funnel, me from my college days, I think of funneling beer, and it goes down very quickly. And really the sales process right now is anything but that. It's much more like a vortex. If you remember that game when you were kids where you drop a coin in and it spins around in the vortex, I consider users that coin, and the very set process of getting into the product, getting a demo, more like the vortex. It takes a very long time. It's very inflexible, and you can't really change course. So deviating from the sales process is nearly impossible. A lot of it's automated, and it is required. They have systems that manage it. It's also apparent that the sales reps and the emails and everything that you receive, all the interactions, mostly they just replace your name or your company name and the logo, and they give you the same sales pitch, and they change the use cases very slightly. But it seems very, very set in their ways, right? So it's almost like, you're a dime a dozen, right? That you're not really unique. They're just fitting what you need into an already existing process. And depending on the company that the product you're trying to buy, it could take 2, 3, 4, possibly 5 interactions with the sales team and being qualified before you're actually given access to a real demo to the product. We recently shopped around for a product for our team, for a learning management system, and there were several of my team members involved, and it took 4-hour-long sessions. So between us, about 8 to 12 hours of people hours before we were given a demo, before we were actually allowed to see the product. The whole time we're being qualified without being given a price. So you're spending all this time. It's heavy investment just to without even knowing the final price. Sometimes not even with an idea of price. And invariably, there were hidden PS costs, professional services that generally amounted to between 20 and 30% of an increase in what the baseline price might have been. So had we known that, we probably would not have gotten involved from the beginning. The name of the game for the sales vortex is to get people into the funnel, to get the coin dropped. Now, traditionally, knowledge deliverables, think technical documentation, things like that, don't play a leading role in this process. If the documentation is public, there's really no way for them to go from reading the docs into the sales funnel. So it's not really treated as a pre-sales piece of information that's required for the company. So if we look at this model, knowledge is really treated as number 7 in the vortex, right? It's not even in there. It's post-sales. And this includes technical documentation, videos, and even academies. Since they aren't seen as a mechanism for lead generation, they're treated more as an afterthought. I think in some ways this is dangerous because the relationship between the user and product education begins pretty late in the process. I think this meme sums it up really well, the end user experience with the sales vortex. You can see with Phoebe and Joey repeating after one another, and at the end it's just what the salesperson wants you to, the process that the sales rep needs you to go through. So what is PLG? PLG flips the funnel. Product-led growth. It means that you put the end user in the driver's seat. They're not starting some process with your organization. They're starting a process themselves, and that process is really your product. So this is I think a wonderful representation of how the funnel is flipped and the different stages that it goes through. And you see purchasing is still at the end. You have discovery still in the beginning. You have purchasing still in the end. But the thing that changes is the entire middle of the funnel, really. Users are going to get product awareness on their own, but instead of entering the sales vortex, they get the product, right? They're experiencing the product. That's how they go through discovery. And you really want them to get in with the least amount of barriers as possible. So if we look at some of the principles of PLG, they're really pretty straightforward. And keeping in mind some of the PLG leaders that we looked at before, this will make sense. The product needs to be designed in a way that users have limited barriers, immediate value, and continued success or continued value. Another important aspect of designing for the end user is to be aware of where your product fits into their daily lives and other products that might be used in conjunction with yours or at the same time as your product. So what's the user going through when they're using your product? And that'll be important for user experience, language, and so on, because if you're too different, then it doesn't really fit in well. So although you don't have to copy, it should kind of be in the same ballpark, meaning give a very, personal example. As a cybersecurity company, I always look at the other applications that our users might be using, because if they're not using confetti and pictures and cartoons and stuff in their product, then you don't really want to be doing that with yours either, because it's so out of the realm of what they're used to, going from one product to another in their daily lives. You want to stay within some sort of barrier of what the other ones are, the other products they're using, how they approach it. So you want to deliver value. Obviously, self-service is the North Star of a PLG strategy. If users can use the product on their own, and then if they run into an issue or a question, find it on their own as quickly as possible without having to talk to a human, wonderful. That's really the textbook definition of a success in a PLG strategy. You also want to reduce costs. Now, it's not just the sales of the reduce the cost of sales and investment, like when I was looking for an LMS, but it's also the emotional cost that you want to reduce, because you don't when you give them a bad emotional experience with your product, then they're not going to be as likely to enjoy it, or they might go in with kind of bitter feelings when they start to use it if they've just been through an atrocious and brutal sales cycle. So you want to reduce costs, both physical time, people hours, and also emotional. When I look at the hierarchy for knowledge, the hierarchy for knowledge is product, knowledge experience, which might more things like technical documentation, and support. You want the product to solve and answer as many user issues as possible, but then you want them to work their way out in from here, and actually to work their way. And you want as many of the answers to be found in the product, and then if not, then they can go to documentation or academy. And then finally, for the least amount, you want them to be able to access your support. So let's jump into knowledge experience. Knowledge experience is the content creation arm of content strategy and works on the tactical and operational level. So really at its heart, as I envision it, knowledge experience is a content creation or content development machine. Okay, that's really what we do. That means that we might get requirements from product managers or from field teams that where we get our marching orders, but at the end of the day, we are the content creators. So with knowledge experience, I advocate for a content as product model. Traditionally, technical documentation, UX writing, and even academies are an item on a definition of done checklist for a feature or for something else you're doing with the product. We have a new feature. Did we check the copy with UX writer? Is it approved? Did we write a release note? Did we cover this in the documentation, update it, or add new ones where need be? That's the prevailing way that things are done. New features with content as product, we run our own sprints, because the truth is the new features that are being developed, while important, are really the minority of work that we do in any given sprint. We have lots of deliverables that we're putting out, new stuff, updating, fixing bugs, doing research on our own. So the entire content creation process, really the output is a product in and of itself, especially in a PLG strategy. So some common things are like improving SEO for documentation and the academy, checking analytics, doing peer review, updating, testing, retesting, making sure everything still works. For UX, we have a backlog of error messaging and other things in the product that come up. So there's always something to be done that's not necessarily related to just a new feature. So content is the product itself. So I want to go through each of the pillars of content experience, of knowledge experience. I'd say creating user personas is a first step for UX writing. That's the first pillar. But the ultimate goal, I think, is to truly understand your users, right? Less about their hobbies. They like to walk their dog or feed cats on the street, which you see in some user stories. And I want to concentrate more on their expectations and goals, and how, again, mentioning this before, how your product fits into their daily life and into the other products that they're using. The user story that explains where your product fits into their life is much more interesting to me when trying to build content for them and an experience for them than it is whether or not they like to go to the gym. Deliverables for UX writing can vary, but generally they include a voice and tone guide, right, and making sure that it's applied across the product. And this really develops ideally into a taxonomy across the entire organization, right? In terms of communication with partners, for marketing. That doesn't mean that we can't be creative in the other parts of the organization, but at least create a taxonomy of this is our tone and voice, and these are the words that we need to use. This also creates consistency. Consistency is extremely important, and really, in my opinion, the realm of the UX writers, because it builds the relationship and trust between the product and the user. Consistency is not only the responsibility of knowledge experience, it's across the entire organization, but I would say the leader of this should be the UX writer. And finally, validation. When users receive validation that they succeeded or that they failed, and you give them a way to fix it, this is another form of validation. They're more likely to use the product and to evangelize the product, which in PLG terminology is going viral, and extremely important to the success and growth of a PLG strategy. For technical documentation, it's really the basics that we all know. Getting started, which could be basic product information, a glossary, maybe an overview of the product. How-tos, these are for existing users that already know the product a bit and they're trying to answer a very specific question. You have product references. You might have some parts of your product that they just need to go and not learn a lot about, but just go and see what every icon means or what different statuses mean, right? Those are the kinds of things that are like references that they might check every now and again. Tutorials assume zero prior knowledge. So this is something that you actively want to teach them. And troubleshooting, obviously, if they run into an issue, how can I fix it? And finally, depending on the product, API reference and recipes. So those are the deliverables for the technical writing aspect. And finally, we have the academy. And really, when you educate, it provides a structured learning that you've defined, right? So ideally, you've already defined what the first success is going to be, or what we're going to define as a success. So you say when a user successfully learns X, they will be able to succeed in the product doing Y, right? So that's really the goal, is structured learning, that you're walking them along a path that if they complete it, they're going to succeed in something you want them to succeed in. It also can provide foundational product education, product tours, the basics, things like that. It can also fill in product gaps. So your product can only take you so far. There are some limitations. We cannot teach you how to do the more complex things. So we're going to do that in the academy. And also certifications. This gives you something to aspire to. It gives them a reason to be in the academy and in the product. And then you get into things like gamification, all these different types of things to keep them engaged. Another main purpose of the LMS is really insights, analysis. You want to track the correlation between courses and certifications to various parts of the product and to various parts of succeeding. What number of users completed the academy and different aspects of the academy, and what was their level of success in the product. And then you want to try to find correlation, find out if it's a leading factor or not, where things can be updated or changed. So really, the LMS gives you very good insights into what role education plays in your user success. And finally, scaling, right? It allows you, let's say, you onboard your first new customers. They're actually onboarded with representatives of your company, but then you want to be able to let them onboard new team members on their own. So the academy is a very good way to do that. So they'll have a point person, someone who's already been trained, but then you can continue and carry on and scale new team members with the academy. And finally, engagement keeps your users coming back to your product and getting derived benefit. So when you go put out new courses, you encourage them to take them. Content strategy. Well, content strategy is the plan of action to implement product-led growth using content created by knowledge experience. That's content strategy. There's not much more to say about it. What I want to show now is how each of the phases or how each phase of the PLG customer acquisition, what I'd like to do now is to connect the dots a bit. Content strategy puts it all together. What I want to do is take all the different phases of PLG, show which knowledge, experience, deliverables we have at our disposal, and how we match those in the different phases and the role they play in the different phases of PLG to create a successful content strategy. So if we look here, we have three distinct phases or segments. The first is discovery, and this includes awareness and consideration of the product. The second phase is what was the middle of the funnel. I call this onboarding, and it includes acquisition or sign up, activation, and value recognition. And the final phase is purchasing, retention, and renewal. This is the money aspect of it. So in the discovery phase, users have identified a business problem they need to solve. Usually they're doing a Google search, social media search, and doing, checking out reviews for a solution to their problem. And generally they're testing more than one product, not just yours. So you're going head to head against several other ones that have made it through some sort of initial screening. For PLG products, users are weighing how easy it is to use the product on their own, and when they need help, how easily and how quickly they can find the answers on their own without having to talk to someone or email someone or something like that. So the goal of knowledge deliverables at this point is to inform them of what the product solves, how our product solves your challenges. It inspires them. So you also want to introduce them to some things that your product does that maybe they didn't know about. So they came for problem A, they stayed for problem B, C, and D that your product solves. And finally, to reinforce, this is to remind them and show them through very good knowledge deliverables how your product solves this. It gives them confidence that your product can do what they need it to do. Now, when we're flipping the funnel here, knowledge now is not relegated to post sales. So if your knowledge base is public and your academy includes at least one or two courses that they can check out for free, it really plays a central role. So the knowledge base in the academy are a way for them to land, get information about your product, see what it does. And it plays a role. It really plays a role in the pre-sales phase. Obviously, at this point, UX writing doesn't play a role because they haven't gotten to the product yet. So this is our actual documentation center as it exists today, right? This is how, if you go to our docs, this is how it'll look. It's external and public, so potential customers do use this in their discovery phase and their decision-making process. And there's no way to directly access help from within the product right now. This is the only source of product information that exists. It informs to a certain extent, and it might inspire, meaning that they might, be able to find things that we do that they didn't even know we do. But you really have to search and dig for some inspiration. Okay, this is not ideal. What I call this type of documentation center, it's really a one-dimensional approach. The information architecture is not great. And since it's mostly broken down by product component, it's more like an encyclopedia. If you know what you're looking for, it can be very helpful, but it's not so easy to search, and it's not very friendly to navigate through. What this is a very basic prototype that we're creating for a new knowledge base. And let's take a look at some of the differences. Here, there are clear paths for them to take, right? Clear things for them to do. The search is very prominent, and the titles are not product components or features. They're actually use cases that potential users would be interested in. So either what they're looking for, right, or for a little bit of inspiration. There is an in-app widget for our new solution, so current users will be able to search within the application and get the documentation or answers that they need directly in the application. In designing the architecture, the new primary question was, what will users find helpful, if they go to it? And we really came to the resolution that in a perfect world, current users would not actually go to this external documentation site, the knowledge base. They will use the in product. So what does that mean? It means that the audience for this external site is really just potential customers. So now the architecture serves a very PLG purpose: to inform, inspire, and reinforce. Also, navigation inside the documentation center, the tabs and the links are not for within the documentation center like they were previously to the different sections. Now they're really all CTAs, right? So you can link to the Academy, which is just another source of free learning, another way to get into the PLG, to get the user into the PLG funnel. They can book a demo if they're ready for the next phase. And for some reason, if the user took a wrong turn at Albuquerque, they can get back into the app quite easily. So really here, the main purpose of this external documentation center knowledge base is that it's an entry point to the PLG funnel. The same is true for our Academy. This is, again, a prototype. The idea is that to start learning, to get involved, to just jump in, and with an email address that they have to submit, although some things are free, it actually puts them into the funnel, and we can keep in touch with them and see how much they completed. And this is also a good idea to see with the analytics, what's the success rate of users that signed up for a course, at what point they might drop off, or what's the correlation between finishing the course, the free course that we have, and users actually going to the next phase and becoming customers. The next phase of content strategy is the onboarding. So what goes on at this phase? There are several points of entry for acquisition or sign up. You obviously from the .com, the documentation site, the Academy, and in rare cases, not in our case, but sometimes even social media. So it's really important for when they sign up and this is their first time in the product, the first impression is critical. Because you have to map the expectations to what they've already heard. If the .com and social media is telling one story and using a certain type of language, and then they get into the product and it's not at all the same, what are they being promised? What is the language being used, and what are the expectations that marketing or social media are setting for users, and what is the reality of when they get in the product? If there's too large of a gap between the expectations that are built up and the first impression they get with the product, it's not going to be ideal. The first win this is really hard to define, right? Even for, we have automated workflows. So you would naturally think maybe the first win is an automated to build the first workflow. That might be true. But if you're only designing for the first win, value recognition obviously spikes in the beginning because they see something succeed right away, but then it can go from 100 to 0 very quickly, which is why number 3 is probably even more important, which is the continued winning. They might have the basics down from the first win, but if knowledge, experience, deliverables can get you the continued value, how to implement the next use cases, ones that increase in complexity. So I think this is the role in here that knowledge experience plays. Obviously, the most critical one in this phase, the pillar, is UX writing, because this is their first experience with the product. And their first interaction with it. And the product should be able to take care of the majority of their needs. And then obviously the Academy and the knowledge base should play a backup role so that they can have that self-serve experience if they run into an issue or want to do additional learning to take it to the next level. And finally, go viral, right? So if a user gets an immediate success and continued value over the next several days, and we're not talking a long time, a TTV of weeks. they'll want to share this with the team. I recently did this with a product that I tried and loved. It's called Tango. It's actually a service where you just click around your screen to do something, and it creates documentation with screenshots directly from it. Now, I don't use it for documentation, but internally, it's much better than having to go on a Zoom with someone and record and go back, is that one developer can do a complicated process one time. It records everything with screenshots and creates documentation. It's a wonderful way to share knowledge. And I said, this is excellent. And I shared it with the entire company. So that's a way to go viral very quickly, to go from one user who found immediate benefit for several different use cases and shared it with the entire company. The final segment is purchase and acquisition. Why is there a big question mark? There's not much to say. We flipped the funnel. Whereas in the traditional sales vortex, this is where knowledge experience starts. In PLG, we've been involved from the beginning. Sales and growth is the result of our work, and not the where we start, where they end, we start. So this is really the idea of flipping the funnel and the benefit that we can provide early on in the process to actually get them to the purchase and renewal phase. I know we covered a lot, and I hope everyone got some benefit out of this. I really want to thank the docs and everyone involved. It was a really special thing to be able to present a little bit of the work that we've been doing, and I'm happy to stay in touch and answer any of your questions. Have a great day.
Hey everyone, welcome to the last Q&A session for Write the Docs 2022. We're joined here by Ishara and Alex. Thank you both for joining.
Happy to be here.
Thank you for having us.
All right, let's get stuck into some questions. I might start with you, Ishara, actually. I think people really got a lot out of your sort of top tips for interviewing, because it's a hard thing to do, interviewing candidates. So I actually have a question that I pose is, what would be your favorite or most valuable question that you ask when you're doing a technical writer interview?
I think, personally for me, it is the first question. Please tell me something about yourself, introduce yourself, because that would be the icebreaker for the entire session, and that would give the first impression to me. So it's always bad to judge, but I get either it's a good feeling or positive impression or a negative one. We could easily figure that out from the very first sentence itself. So that is my favorite part.
Oh, interesting. So you think you can get a fair few insights out of a person based on sort of how they interact in that first engagement. Very interesting.
Yeah, kind of.
What do you think about questioning style as well? There's a couple of different ways you can do it. Like a good example was that one that you said, tell us a bit about yourself, that sort of leading style question. But have you tried other style of interviewing techniques, like tell me about a time when sort of questions in the interviewing process, and what have you found more effective there?
So I would say it's mostly not the type of question, but the type of style that we follow. So one thing I always try to do is get a candidate to talk more. Rather than I'm explaining what's happening inside the organization, I get them to ask more questions, so that it gives a really good insight on what they have in their mind and what they want to know. I have actually tried that the latter part of what you suggested, like tell me about a time that things were hard or things like that. So they were really helpful when you were interviewing someone with a bit of experience. But for a fresh graduate, that wouldn't be the case. So in my case, I always interviewed for the entry-level technical writers. So I always ask questions about their final work or university work, or how they worked with their teams inside the university or college, things like that. That also actually gives a really good insight, especially if you don't have a lot of experience. I wouldn't follow that style. Yeah.
That's a good point. You need to tailor the interview for the type of candidate you have. That's a really good point. I might switch over to you now, Alex, if I may. So one question was asked, and it's this one. It's knowing that product docs are part of the pre-sale experience. How can we make sure our docs are suited to that context as part of the PLG?
Well, that's a really great question. So kudos to whoever asked that one. So your content shouldn't change. I don't think that the content itself should change, but that it should be because you're not going to have two separate sets of docs, right? One that's like, say, in the product and serving people post sales and pre-sales. I think that the thing that should change is the entry point, right? So once someone has already been in the docs, they might go through, if you don't have an in-app widget, excuse me, then they'll most likely, bookmark the page or have a favorite page they go to, and they're already in, right? Like a direct, they get in directly. But if someone is just laying there, you want to give them different entry points that talk to their use cases. So I think once they're in there, once you're in documentation, you expect a certain thing. Now, let's say you have someone like a CISO, and I'm going to use the cybersecurity example. If you have a CISO looking what this product is, they're thinking about spending, $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 on a multi-year deal for a product. They just want to make sure it checks certain boxes. They're not going to get into how to configure this integration and where's the API. They're not going to get into that. Maybe the practitioners will. So it needs to speak to them, but at the same time, you need to have some CISO level information that would be more entry point stuff. And then obviously have a really good search for practitioners or people that are actually going to be using it. But I don't think the content should necessarily change. You don't have to change the style. It should still, and this is what we discussed with UX writing and why it's one of the pillars, is because the voice should match from the .com through the documentation site, through the product. It has to be all the way through, or else you get a Jekyll and Hyde type of experience, which might be fun, but can be slightly discomforting for customers.
Absolutely. That's really good insights there. Thank you for that. There's one more question that came through as well, which would be, what would be the most effective place to start out in PLG strategy that might help sell the idea to the businesses that perhaps not quite sure about what they should do? Yeah,
so it's very difficult. People say, there are lots of PLG leaders. So first of all, if you're interested in PLG as a topic, just check out that hashtag in LinkedIn, on Substack. There are really great leaders that you can learn a lot quickly from. But if it's not an organizational thing, it's a company strategy, an organizational go-to-market strategy. Obviously, you would have to convince the sales team that they're not needed as much, which is very difficult. But it also goes with the product planning, or what kind of features are being planned, what's being prioritized in engineering, things like this. So it's not just a documentation or knowledge experience problem or thing to solve. So if the whole company is not on board, like we discussed early on in the talk, then it's just not going to happen. But if you do want to give it a go and show that you can be part of the lead generation and customer acquisition process, don't get anyone's permission. Just build it, side project. That's why I do Docs as product strategy, or content as product strategy. Build a proof of concept and show how it's going to work. And it's much harder to say no to something that you've shown works than trying to sell an idea for something that's so out of the realm of what they've been doing.
Show it, don't tell it. That's a good advice. Absolutely. And one last question. This one was from Swapnil. He was saying that he's a really big fan of evangelizing, particularly when it comes to documentation, because I think a lot of us sort of fail to do that sometimes. He was wondering why and how can you actually effectively advocate for your work as part of a PLG?
Again, really, it's a good question. It's a tough question. You can do this with metrics, right? Like you can show where things have gone. Also, if you are in touch with the marketing teams, meaning you're not an island as a knowledge experience team. When you're going PLG, you're in touch much more with the marketers, with sales to find out. And so your site should be added to whatever they're monitoring for lead generation, meaning like if on your docs page you have book a demo or get started or log into or start with the product, and they can do it from there, then I want to see how many leads are being generated from documentation, how many are not. The thing about evangelizing, and all documentarians know this, if the user goes to documentation and does not find what they need a single time, they lose confidence almost immediately. It's like if you go to, let's just say, an Italian restaurant and they screw up the pasta with marinara sauce, you're not going to give them the second chance, because that's what they should be doing, right? On a basic level. So we have to get it right from the beginning, and that doesn't mean you can't have mistakes, but we have to make sure that we get our basics down and that we're building customer confidence in our documentation and our knowledge deliverables wherever they are. So that's the beginning, I think, to evangelizing.
Right. That's really just start with the basics. Sounds like. Yeah, really good. Well, look, I think that brings us to a close for the Q&A session and indeed for the official parts of Write the Docs 2022. Thank you to you both for coming in and joining us for the last Q&A session. It's been great having a chat with you. And for folks who are looking to stay around and perhaps explore some topics that they might have heard of in the conference over the last 2 days, the platform's going to remain open for a couple of more hours yet. So you still have a little bit of time to catch up with people in the hallways and the different rooms and get involved as the conference closes down. But just want to say thank you to everyone. It's been a pleasure hosting. And I look forward to hopefully seeing you next year. And until then, Docs or it didn't happen.